Hello and welcome back. So today we're going to go over the top fantasy performers from week 9, but in order to qualify for this list, they have to be under 50% ownership. I'll be choosing 3 forwards, 2D, and 1 goalie, and these are the guys who are red hot heading into week 10. So let's start by going over the 3 forwards right off the bat, and there's going to be a bit of a theme here, and that is guys who are getting it done on bad teams. Let's start it off with a guy I mentioned a few weeks back and streamed him for a little bit, mainly because of his hits and shots, and that's Owen Tippett. Now, Tippett is a hits and shots guy, but he does get some offensive production as well. His shot totals usually vary wildly from game to game. Sometimes it's 1 shot, sometimes he pops off for 6. The hits are a little bit more consistent, but regardless, he had an excellent week. 2 goals, 1 assist, 1 power play point, 10 shots, 14 hits for 3.5 hits per game. The Flyers had a few high-scoring games in that 4-game week last week. I wouldn't necessarily expect that to continue as they are 26th in the league in goals for, but they don't have a lot to work with right now, and if Konechny and Kevin Hayes are owned up in your league, you may want to try Owen Tippett when the Flyers have a 4-game week. This week, they have a brutal 3-game schedule against the Avs, Devils, and Rangers, so I'd probably steer clear of Tippett this week, but definitely keep this in mind for the future, especially if you're in need of a hits guy up front. Now, speaking of the Flyers and Kevin Hayes, another guy I've mentioned in pretty much every weekly video that I've done, as he falls into the category of a guy on a bad team getting it done, and that is Kevin Hayes. Now, he gets a lot of the power play time and top offensive situations, and he's been very good this year with almost a point per game average, 28 points in 29 games, 10 of those points on the power play, and quietly averaging 3 shots per game on the year. But that number exploded last week up to 5.25 shots per game. And if you look at the game log, it's 7, 6, 3, 5, so you're getting consistent high shot volume from Hayes last week. Now, Hayes is a very reliable point producer, unlike Tippett, and his ownership somewhat reflects that. And again, it is a tough week for the Flyers, but keep this in mind for the future. And just a quick note, he is playing his former team, the New York Rangers, on Saturday night at home, and most players do like playing their old teams, and they do tend to produce well when they're playing them, so maybe look for that game as a potential stream. But again, it's a difficult week for the Flyers, so maybe keep this in mind for a 4-game week in the future. Now, another forward getting it done this week was Jack Roslovic, though, to be fair, that's all boosted by an incredible game against the Kings where he had 2 goals, 2 assists, 2 power play points, and 2 shots. He's only 4% owned. He hasn't had any fantasy relevance this year, only 14 points in 24 games, 4 on the power play, but 2 shorthanded goals, so if your points league counts those, that could boost his appeal a little bit. Now, the main reason to own him right now is his line exposure 5-on-5. He's playing with Patrick Laine, who has 9 points in his last 6 games, including 6 goals since coming back from injury. So to get exposure to Patrick Laine through Jack Roslovic at only 4% ownership might be an interesting play. The drawbacks here are inconsistent shot volume, and prior to Sunday, he was goalless in his last 8 games. This is definitely a deeper league play for sure, but apparently getting murdered by the Sabres has woken up the Jackets offense, though it hasn't fixed their goaltending or D, which does continue to be decimated by injury. And speaking of that, one last note, Adam Boqvist, who I was high on in the preseason, I was high on him when Werenski went down as a potential power play quarterback replacement for the Jackets. He's been skating, and he could return to the lineup in the next week or two. So if you need a power play quarterback defenseman, maybe look to stash Boqvist or keep an eye on him for when he gets back. But Jack Roslovic, definitely a deeper league play. 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points last week, 2 power play points. But again, all of that came in this one game against LA. So that is something to keep an eye on. But he is riding a 3-game point streak. And that's likely due to his line assignment with Laine. Now let's look at 2D getting it done in Week 9, and a guy who's been getting it done with an elevated role in Toronto is Rasmus Sandin. So over the last 2 weeks, he's Yahoo rank 59 in category leagues, and in that time span, he had 2 goals, 3 assists, 3 power play points, 10 shots, 15 hits, and 10 blocks. So excellent peripherals and point production as well. Now, last week, only 3 games, but 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points, 2 power play points, and 2.67 hits per game. And down below, you see his season totals, but they are kind of hindered by a lack of opportunity getting top 4 minutes, which he is getting now with Riley out. And with Riley out, he's moved up and taken some power play looks and done really well there. Now, the Leafs are rolling on a 3-game winning streak, and they currently sit at second in the Atlantic, only 3 points behind the powerhouse Bruins, and you may be able to ride this for another week or two until Riley comes back. But you do have to monitor Morgan Riley's health, as Sandin does lose a bit of fantasy value once he comes back. But you can see the game log, a goal, 2 assists, both on the power play in the game against Calgary, getting some hits, getting some shots as well. And every now and then he throws a nice game for blocks coverage, 4 blocks there against Dallas. So this is definitely something to keep an eye on. But if you're anywhere near the Toronto area, this has probably been owned up for a while. Because most of those people in the greater Toronto area are very aware of what's going on with their team. So definitely look for this if you're not near Toronto and you're in need of a defenseman who's a power play quarterback for the week. Now, our last defenseman is a very steady two-way defenseman in Adam Larsson. I've mentioned before that the Kraken are top 10 in offense and power play, and while Larsson doesn't see power play time, his main value, especially this week, was as a hitter with some offensive production. So 1 goal, 1 assist, 13 hits, 4.33 hits per game, which is huge, and it does look like a bit of a one-off when you compare that to his 2.7 hits per game average for the year, but he's consistently getting hits and blocks, and that's something that you could potentially target in category leagues with those two categories. He's got 9 points in 27 games, which isn't necessarily targetable, but it is something. And if you're in a plus-minus league, he's a plus 12 on the year. Now, if you look at this visualization I did a few days ago, and I'll be featuring this in a video soon, but these are the top D pairs in the league, and the upper right corner is a high expected goal differential and a high actual goal differential. And you can see that Dunn-Larsson pair as one of the best in the league. Their expected goal differential is 2.34, but their actual is 11. They've got 25 goals for, only 14 against, so a very good two-way pair. And you may read that and want to go pick up Vince Dunn because he's the one that gets the power play time, and that could be a great option for you, but he is 54% owned because of that. And Larsson as a hits and blocks D with some offensive production as well, a great two-way play for plus-minus leagues. That could be a good option for a specific fantasy need. But yeah, this is a nice look at some of the pairings. You can't really see it, but this is Siegenthaler and Hamilton, which is one of the best pairs in the league. If you have Shea Theodore, he's up here as well. We'll get into this a little bit more in a coming video, hopefully this week. But you can see that this is a very good two-way pair. So in plus-minus leagues, that's something to keep an eye on. And he is also ownable in hits and blocks leagues for the reasons I just mentioned. Now, the best fantasy waiver ad goaltender last week was Charlie Lindgren of the Washington Capitals, filling in for Darcy Kemper, who is now listed on IR. Lindgren last week, 4 games, 4 wins, a clean sweep, 1.50 goals against, and a .949 save percentage. Those are elite numbers, and Lindgren is an analytics darling, and the Caps do use analytics, especially when it comes to goalies. So you'll remember they let Vanacek and Samsonov go, and despite the fact that both of those guys have kind of found their game in new places, the goalies that were brought in are getting the job done, though there have been some not-so-great games from Kemper this year. But Lindgren is probably not going to take the number 1 role, but what you're getting from him right now is elite 1B level play, and the Caps are 13th in the league in both expected and actual goals against, so you're getting pretty good defense in front of him as well. Now, the Caps are also 11th in expected goals for, which means he's likely going to continue to get run support, especially with guys like Oshie getting back in the lineup, and that has been a theme. Remember, John Carlson missed some time. They've had a lot of guys banged up. Orlov just came back into the lineup, so that does help Lindgren as well. And then one other thing that I wanted to point out and remind you has to do with the number 1 rule of the data draft strategy, and that is don't draft a goalie in the first or second round. Now, this is a list of the top goaltending performances of last week, and this is just a snapshot of guys who played well in fantasy last week. But you'll see the 2 goalies who were drafted in the first round are on this list. But you will also see a lot of guys who were drafted way behind them, and you'll also see a bunch of waiver guys as well. So guys like Gustafsson, Lindgren, DeSmith, Hill, Kochetkov, Riddick. Copley wasn't even an NHL goalie until last week. All of these guys played well. And if you went with the 2 goalie option and streamed a goalie every week for that additional start, you'd be able to access one of these guys more frequently. And the key component is you'd have a much better offense. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of not drafting a goalie high, because some of these names, this happens every single year where guys just jump out of nowhere and start playing well. Allmark was a deep league pick, probably 9th, 10th round and above. Samsonov was at least a 9th or 10th round pick in our league. Matt Murray I chose around that range as well. Jari was a 4th round pick for me. But some of these guys, I mean, Stuart Skinner stole the net in Edmonton. Who saw that coming? You do see Shesterkin's here. You see Vasilevsky's here. But they did lose a bunch of positions of value. He was drafted or pre-ranked 9. Now he's at 71. Shesterkin was 10. Now he's at 27 on the week. This is not season long. This is just for the week. But again, just something I wanted to bring to your attention as a kind of like a capstone to this whole project is just sort of using the strategy to your advantage and not picking these guys in the first round. And if you are one of those guys that streams goalies on a regular basis and you picked up Charlie Lindgren, it likely paid off for you a lot this week. And he will continue to get some starts as Kemper is still listed on IR. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And one other thing, those defensive metrics that I just talked about with Washington being 13th in the league and expected and actual goals against, that does factor in a lot of those injuries. So they're likely playing better than that defensively when they're healthy, and they're only going to get healthier going forward. So maybe if you own Lindgren right now, maybe you're a Kemper owner, maybe you've lost faith in Darcy Kemper, maybe somebody would be willing to let him go, a buy low opportunity. That's what you're looking for in terms of a buy low. A team decimated with injuries, a goalie that's been a little bit inconsistent because of that. His backup comes in and starts to get the ball rolling, gets everything pointed in the right direction, and he's been pretty good on the season as well. So this is what you kind of look for in terms of buying low. But Charlie Lindgren has been a great waiver stream this week. That's going to do it for this video. Remember to like and subscribe. Share this around with some friends if you don't want them to be left in the dark. If you do want that advantage, then obviously you got to keep it to yourself. But I do appreciate any help that you guys give in growing the channel. If I've helped you in fantasy at all this year, let me know in the comments below. I'll make a featured post on Instagram or whatever. I do like to help you guys. That's the whole goal of this channel, is to help you guys win your fantasy leagues. So hopefully I've helped you do that. But thanks again, and I will see you in the next one.